I last left off looking at the lack of understanding surrounding the causes of schizophrenia and with the unanswered call for more effective treatments and for services to be delivered more effectively. But to jump straight back in and address questions of culture and schizophrenia, I will continue to pull from the academic literature. Robert B. Edgerton and Alex Cohen, Culture and Schizophrenia, the DOS-MD Challenge, from the British Journal of Psychiatry, 1994. In 1979, the International Pilot Study on Schizophrenia, IPSS, by the World Health Organization, WHO, reported that the course of schizophrenia was more favorable in what were referred to as developing than in developed countries, a finding that it reaffirmed in a subsequent 5-year follow-up of the same individuals. Several previous studies had reported similar findings, but perhaps because this was the first major research enterprise to attempt comparable diagnosis and assessment of outcome in a transnational study, the IPSS finding was hailed by one member of its research team as astonishing. At the same time, a leader in the field of cross-cultural psychiatry referred to this finding as the single most provocative datum to emerge in that field. Although the validity of this finding has occasionally been questioned, it is now frequently cited with approval in the literature on schizophrenia. For example, Birchwood et al. Began their exploration into the influence of ethnicity and family structure on relapse in first episode schizophrenia with this statement: "There is now overwhelming evidence that the outcome for people with schizophrenia in Western industrialized countries is markedly inferior to that of those in the Third World." With a long-awaited publication of the details of the WHO Determinants of Outcomes of Severe Mental Disorder, DOS-MD study in 1992, not only was the IPSS finding strongly reaffirmed, but the reason for the difference in course between developing and developed societies was said to be a result of culture. Vikram Patel, Alex Cohen, Rangaswamy Thera, and Oye Goreje. Possibly, is the outcome of schizophrenia really better in developing countries? From the Brazilian Journal of Psychiatry, 2006. That schizophrenia has a better prognosis in non-industrialized societies has become an axiom in international psychiatry. The most compelling evidence for this comes from 3 cross-national studies conducted by the World Health Organization: the International Pilot Study of Schizophrenia, IPSS, the Determinants of Outcome of Severe Mental Disorder, DOS-MD, and their successor, the International Study of Schizophrenia, ISO-S. Here, I'm not entirely sure why the authors made the change from DOS-MD to DOS-MD. The most striking finding in all of this research was the existence of consistent and marked differences in the prognosis of schizophrenia between the centers in developed countries and centers in developing countries. The DOS-MD investigators then went on to note that the greatest contribution of their research was not in providing the answers, but in delineating questions about how societies and cultures shape the process of illness. This is the DOS-MD challenge, but it has not been taken up, although a host of sociocultural factors have been cited as contributing to variation in the course of schizophrenia in different settings. Family support and styles of interaction, industrialization, and urbanization in particular. We have little evidence from low-income countries that clearly demonstrates the beneficent influence of these variables. Indeed, the DOS-MD research did not provide any direct sociocultural evidence to support its conclusions, yet its findings and the evidence on which they were based have hardly been questioned. Even though the DOS-MD has been cited as the single most important finding in cross-cultural psychiatry, it suffered a host of methodological problems. 1. While pointing to differences in outcome as significant, the investigators downplayed significant cross-national variation in the incidence of broadly defined schizophrenia or cultural differences in subtypes of the disorder, and chose to place an overwhelming emphasis on universal aspects of schizophrenia, namely the lack of variation in the incidence of narrowly defined schizophrenia and the stability of the disorder at the syndrome level. 2. The multidimensional measures of outcome and course lacked validity as variables such as percentage of the follow-up period spent in the hospital or on psychotropic medication reflected differences in socioeconomic environments rather than variations in course of illness. 3. The failure to account for the much higher attrition rates in the developing country sites. And 4. The unfounded claim that case ascertainment problems at 5 of the sites, Abidan, Moscow, Rochester, Agra, and Prague, would have been of little consequence regarding the clinical characteristics of the patients. because the validity of schizophrenia research depends, to a large extent, on whether all cases are identified in a defined population over a fixed period of time. This last point suggests a key limitation of the DOS-MEDI findings. At the same time, we have a great amount of evidence that would make us expect the course and prognosis for schizophrenia might be worse in low-income countries. During the last 30 years, cross-cultural psychiatry has embraced, almost without question, the notion that the prognosis for schizophrenia is better in low-income countries than in the wealthy countries of the West. Close examination of the evidence, however, suggests a surprising collective willingness to accept what must be considered, at least by us, unconfirmed beliefs about the perniciousness of the modern and the beneficence of the traditional. Those beliefs notwithstanding, we believe it is time to investigate these questions systematically. As Edgerton and Cohen write, for all the reasons indicated, we believe that it is premature to accept the WHO investigators' assertion that the course of schizophrenia has been shown to be more favorable in developing societies. It is clear, however, that they and other investigators studying both developed and developing societies have shown that the course of schizophrenia varies for reasons which are as yet inadequately understood, but which very likely involve a number of environmental factors, including culture. The task of identifying cultural and other environmental factors that determine the course of schizophrenia cannot be carried out by anthropologists or other social scientists alone, although it is unlikely that it will be accomplished without them. What has long been needed, yet seldom achieved, is collaborative research involving social scientists with psychiatrists, epidemiologists, and investigators from various biomedical disciplines. If this research is to push aside the cultural curtain that obscures our understanding of the course of schizophrenia, it must involve direct observation at many points in time over the course of illness being examined. The technology for such research is well developed, and the cost need not be excessive. Even during the decade of the brain in mental illness research, the study of the impact of cultural factors on the course of severe mental disorders is clearly warranted. However, culture must not become a shibboleth. That is to say, a word or saying used by adherents of a party, sect, or belief, and usually regarded by others as empty of real meaning, or merely a gloss for the environment. Research into prediction of the course of schizophrenia will not succeed until environmental factors, including culture, are combined with biomedical factors in prospective research designs capable of observing actual behavior over time. Culture is a conceptually distinct and potentially powerful environmental factor capable of exerting a significant effect on the course of schizophrenia or any other mental disorder. But the nature and power of this effect will remain a black box phenomenon until cultural factors are fully incorporated into research designs on the course of schizophrenia. It is unfortunate that the DOS-MD study did not do this, but we should be grateful to it for so clearly pointing out the need to do so in the future. The authors clearly note that culture has a part to play in schizophrenia, but do not discuss the matter in any concrete terms outside of pointing out the shortcomings of these WHO studies, with the author suggesting, in conclusion, that, let's investigate cultural factors, but at some indefinite time in the future. Any possibility that there might be some aspect of care for schizophrenia that is better in developing versus developed countries, despite obvious negative differences such as increased poverty and types of illnesses in developed versus developing countries, is more or less dismissed. And while I will return to this question of culture, what we do have, of course, is research, and that most certainly should be put in air quotes, in which mental health industry professionals and academics retroactively diagnose individuals from the 18th, 14th, and other centuries in relation to current diagnostic systems, such as the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM, with schizophrenia or schizophrenia-like illnesses. But I will pick back up with that next time. I hope to see you there.